In today's show, the Blazers get waxed by the Clippers, and another blowout loss demands we ask the question, does this team have a losing culture? And if so, what can they do to fix it? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same as Locked On Blazers, your team every day. If you're listening to this one, you're a real one. I appreciate you. Blazers got absolutely walloped. Didn't crack the 90-point mark. Yikes. They lose 118-89 to the Clippers. We're going to talk about that today. And then we're really going to focus on a question that I think is in some ways hanging over this entire season, this entire era of Joe Cronin, Chauncey Billups, post Damian Lillard stuff. Do the Blazers have a losing culture? I want to get into all of that. Share my thoughts on what losing cultures mean in the NBA and my belief on why I might not think it exists. Is that a controversial opinion? Stick with me and I'll walk you through it. First, let's talk about this stupid game. What a stinker. They were bad. The good part of this game, was basically the first shift for Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. It's like, Blazers are down 22-32 after one. They're down 10 points. They're down 10 early. It's not going great, but I thought Scoot had a nice shift, and he finished the first half with 14 points, 2 boards, 2 assists. Shaedon Sharpe had 12 in the first half, and the Blazers are only down 14 at halftime, 52-38. 38 points is not enough. Most of them are coming from Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, so it's like, okay, you know what? This is going to be an awful one, but like at least the two dudes that you kind of hope are the future of the franchise, and Scoot building on what was, a career night on Tuesday evening to build on that and come out on Thursday and have that the type of half he did. Blazers are playing again without Denny Avdia, again without Jeremy Grant, and no Donovan Clingan, who's out for at least a week with an ankle injury. So they start the three guards again, Scoot, Shea, Anthony Simons, and they just can't score. The Clippers are a very good defensive team. They're coming off literally the night before holding a team to under 70 points in an NBA game and beating the Brooklyn Nets by 59, right? Like the if nothing else, the Clippers have some challenges, particularly on the offense side of the ball, but like this is an awesome defensive team that plays a bunch of awesome defenders and has depth that brings in more awesome defenders off the bench to give you hell. They're a really, really just pesky group, right? And the fact that the Blazers can't score isn't that alarming, quite frankly. But down 14, it doesn't feel like they're in the game just because they haven't cracked the 40-point mark. But down 14, you're not out of it. Theoretically. In theory, you're not out of it. Clippers only had 20 points in the second quarter. Blazers only scored 16. It was gross. But over the first 3 minutes of the second half, the Clippers end all doubt. They build a 65-40 lead, and at the with a 13-2 run out of halftime, and at the 8:44 mark of the third quarter, Chauncey Billups pulls his starting guards. Anthony Simons, come on. Shaedon Sharpe, come on. You two gentlemen are going to the bench. In go Delano Banton and Chris Murray. When asked after the game why Billups made this decision, he just said they weren't playing with energy and they weren't scoring anyways. We had to try something different. Early hook for a team that was just a mess. And I agree with Billups wholeheartedly on this one. The Blazers came out of the halftime locker room flat. The lead swells to as many as 32 in the third quarter. But the Blazers kind of mess around. I think the Clippers kind of got bored, honestly. I think at the end of they were beating the Blazers so bad they kind of got bored. And so from down 32 midway through the quarter, the Blazers cut it all the way to 20. Just a 20-point lead. Do you believe in miracles? You shouldn't. A friend of mine who's listening to the program now, because they told me they couldn't wait to hear what I said about this game. True sickos. But a friend of mine after the third quarter is like, I can't believe, text me and said, I can't believe they're only down 20. I was like, yeah, it's obviously way worse than 20. And it was. The Blazers never got closer. They trailed by as many as 33 in the fourth quarter and lost by 29. It was non-competitive. After the early hook in the third quarter, Simons and Shaedon Sharpe came back in and played. Avery Simons and Shaedon Sharpe came back in and played about 2.5 minutes of the fourth. And then, you know what? That's not going to work. And the Blazers eventually got to real deal garbage time, and everybody played who was available, including Justin Minaya and Duop Reith. And finally, a little bit of Ryan Rupert. We got 6.5 glorious minutes of Rupes. This was a beatdown. The Blazers lost by 20 points for the 13th time this season. Let me put that in a little bit of context for you. The Blazers, after losing to the Clippers, are 13-27. Nearly half of their losses are by 20 points. When it goes south, we're talking Antarctica. This is a team that loses and loses big. I mentioned that the only bright spot of this game was basically the first. I thought the first shift more than the second quarter, but the first shift for Scoot Henderson, the first, a decent first half for Shaedon Sharpe. I thought Jabari Walker's minutes were positive, and I think they struck me as positive because his minutes on Tuesday were deeply negative. And so to see him come in and play with energy, get rebounds, get some steals, whatever. He wasn't game changing, but it was that's a nice little thing that happened. Delano Banton finished with a team high 23. I'm going to be honest. I looked at the box score middle of the fourth quarter, and I said to my colleague seated next to me, Jason Quick, Delano's got 21? It didn't feel like it to me. It doesn't mean that he didn't score. Perhaps I wasn't paying as deeply close attention to Delano Banton hitting four 3-pointers late in a game that was a blowout, but he did. There weren't many positives in this game. This was a bad one. Avery Simons was particularly horrendous. My man went scoreless in 30 minutes. 0 of 9 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3, did not get to the free throw line. 1 rebound, 5 assists, couple fouls, a steal, 2 turnovers. Whew. There was a brief moment in the second quarter where Kevin Porter Jr., reserve guard for the Los Angeles Clippers, tried to get loose, tried to shake the Blazers' defensive target often. Simons, a celebratedly deficient defender for many opponents, right? Go get him. Bring me number 1. And KPJ tries to test him. Simons locked him up. Porter Jr. gets off the ball. It comes back, locks him up again, holds him to a tough shot. Kevin Porter Jr. runs down the court complaining about a foul. For 24 seconds, a nice thing happened to Anthony Simons. The unfortunate part was that he played 29.5 more minutes. And he was terrible. It was awful. And I always had back-to-back awful games. I don't think this held true for the whole game, but I think for the first 2 quarters tonight, it was the first 6-quarter stretch when the Blazers are in theory trying to be competitive, that Scoot Henderson was the best player on their team in back-to-back games. I don't think it held for the whole game because Scoot didn't really do much after that early start. He finished with 16. I mean, nobody scored. They scored 89 points. Delano had 23. It doesn't. We don't need to get too deep into the box score. I came away from this game. Well, I was in the arena. It's great. Good to be back after a long road trip, and then I missed the 2 home games to start the trip. Chauncey Billups has kind of lost his fire in post-game press conferences. He doesn't, early in the season when they had a really embarrassing loss to the Memphis Grizzlies. I was going to call them the Tigers. That's the university. The Memphis Grizzlies. He called them out, right? He said if they slept after that one, they played like losers. Even on Tuesday against the Brooklyn Nets, there was more fire from it. We just didn't compete on defense. Against the Clippers, and this has been more common recently with Billups, is he just is resigned to sometimes his team does this. And he's right. Half of their games, they lose by 20. When the Blazers lose, it goes south in a hurry. Speaking of my colleague seated on press row next to me this evening, Jason Quick wrote a story in The Athletic. It's kind of mainly centered around Anthony Simons and his struggles early in the year, and he was really bad to begin the season. He was really bad the last 2 nights. He was on an absolute heater in the first couple weeks of January, and then this week it really cooled off for him. He was bad. Ant was bad in a way tonight that was just like, I thought some of his decision making was bad. He had an early mid-range jumper off 1 foot that's just like, what is that shot? And he had a third quarter fast break kind of fading to his right to avoid contact that just was, he missed, a runner was one of his last shots that he had a chance to make. He missed a 3 late. He had some makeable shots that he missed, but a couple just bad ones, bad decision making, just bad. Every time it was bad. Quick wrote the story, Jason wrote the story, focused around Anthony Simons and it kind of spoke to the Blazers' current culture and what the opinion that Jason espoused in that story, Mr. Quick. I'm not going to call him Mr. Quick. He is older than me, but that's kind of insulting. What Quick wrote in that story was basically that the Blazers have developed a culture where losing is both expected and accepted. I think there is some truth to that. How much truth? And do the Blazers have an incurable losing culture? Does a night like this against the Clippers that didn't even feel like that out of character for them after the night they had earlier this week against the Nets and the nights they've had all year long, does this team have a losing culture? And if so, what do you do to fix it? That's what I want to talk about in the rest of the show. Join me in the second segment, and we'll begin this discussion of culture, the Blazers, and the fixes that need to come. First, though, I want to tell you about Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. All right. Do the Blazers have a losing culture? I would say this team does. This iteration of this roster absolutely has a losing culture. This team loses, and they often let go of the rope, and they have lost a lot. And there is a certain obvious feel to a team like this when you spend a little bit of time around them. And I am not claiming to be super close or super plugged into the team. I'm around them a little bit. I'm probably around them more than you, dear listener. Some of you maybe listen who are around more often than I am. But I spend a little bit of time around the team. I do some media stuff. I talk to the principal actors with some regularity. There is a feel that this team knows they're bad and that there are just going to be nights when you're bad. Also, they've had a whole season last year where they've been bad, and they had 2 seasons before that where they pulled the plug at the end of the year and lost on purpose and ended up with terrible records. You don't draft 7th, 3rd, and 7th in 3 consecutive seasons without stinking. Some of it on purpose, some of it's on purpose, like you losing games because you're not fielding competitive roster. Some of it by design, where you're not maybe playing non-NBA players and 10-day guys that just you found off the street, but you're just putting out a young roster that's not going to be competitive intentionally, right? But the question is, does this team have a losing culture? I think this current iteration of the Blazers does. But what I will push back against, and I think this is sort of the overarching, before I push back, before I go minor contrarian, this might be major contrarian for some of you. I think the concern is that, and I think this is what Jason wrote in his story, and I mentioned in a previous show, so I don't really agree with all of what he wrote. Jason's a friend of mine, but there's plenty of stuff he does I don't agree with. That's the nature of friendship. Sometimes your friends do stuff and you're like, that's not the way I think, right? Like that's sort of the fun part about thinking about basketball. Sometimes you view it through different lenses. But I think there's a concern. I've heard this from fans and seen it on, the internet and seen it in my inbox and maybe on some YouTube comments, et cetera, is that the Blazers are such a mess that this losing culture, a team that accepts and expects to lose, will sort of permeate into the bones of their young players and poison them into the future, right? They will create a losing culture, a sort of a stink that losing is okay, and then that will stick with this group, and they'll never be able to grow out of it because of the habits they've developed, because of the sort of the culture that they've instilled early on, and particularly some of their developmental players, young, in their sort of embryonic state of their NBA careers. I don't buy that. I don't. Certainly, in the NBA, there are losing players. Some dudes are losers. Some dudes don't play hard. Some dudes do not play with discipline. Some guys never improve. Some players, peaks sometime shortly before they got to the NBA and just never pan out. Some folks, some guys in the league are bad basketball players. Some guys in the league are capable of being better but choose not to be. Some dudes are losers. You've been around athletes enough, some guys are losers. Sure. For the most part, the NBA is a bunch of hyper-competitive dudes. I would put that percentage very, very high. Hyper-competitive people. Very hard to make it in the NBA without being hyper-competitive. Impossible to stick without being hyper-competitive. I guess depending on how you define stick. maybe by that I mean third contract. But I'm not a believer. So I do think there are losing players. I do think there are losing teams. And I do think this particular Blazer team has a little bit of the tendency to let go of the rope. A little bit of tendency to say, well, see ya, and have Shaedon Sharpe and Anthony Simons come out completely flat out of halftime and just the game's over. Okay, you've got a brief, maybe you'll make it into, maybe this will be close. No, it won't. You're down 25. It's over. Get out of here. Come out totally flat, right? Certainly there is a tendency with this team to play that way at times. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying what I see in front of me, right? I've called it out plenty of times on the show, and I'm not naive enough to say it doesn't exist. What I'm pushing back against is the lasting effects of quote-unquote losing culture. I don't think it exists. I think if I were to pinpoint something that the Blazers are doing wrong here, it's opportunity cost. You only get one third season of Shaedon Sharpe's development. You only get one second season of Scoot Henderson's development. You only get one first year of Donovan Clingan, right? Throw in some other youngsters if those are your flavor. But there is, by not creating an environment that is allowing them to spread their wings, that is allowing them to play in a functional offense, that is allowing them to play, in a place where winning isn't accepted and expected. Yeah, I think there's some opportunity costs there. What I am pushing back against, though, is not the loss of some valuable developmental minutes and developmental seasons and what that matters. I 100% agree with that. And if you are to push back, the opportunity cost, I think, is a place to push back specifically against what I am arguing, claiming, whatever here. But I do not think that there is some sort of permeation of losing culture that sticks within young players and poisons them forever, and they become losers because of the environment they were brought up in. Certainly there are bad organizations that stay bad for a long time. I'm aware of the existence of the Charlotte Hornets. Apologies to my Uncle Matt. I'm familiar with the 21st Century Kings, and I remember what happened to the Pistons. Oh, wait. The Pistons are a perfect example of what I am trying to illustrate. Let's talk about it. The way you fix a losing culture is creating a stable and functional work environment. Wait, you mean that it can be fixed almost immediately, Mike? Yeah, join me on the other side. Let's talk about the immediate returns, and I'll give you some modern, obvious examples of what I am trying to say. First, though, let's talk about underwear, my underwear. Skims famously makes mostly FIM underwear products. But now they're making underwear products for everybody. You need undergarments? Well, Skims has got you covered. Skims was nice enough to send me some. I don't typically wear the more feminine underwear products. I'm wearing boxers. But they sent me some really comfy ones. Here's the most comfortable. Here's the most complimentary thing I can think to say about Skims. I don't notice them. I wake up in the morning, put on a clean pair of Skims. They are so darn comfy. Stretchy fabric. They feel like you can move around, do your little risky business dance, whatever you need to be doing. But then I get dressed and start my day, and I do not think about my underwear. And that's the best compliment you can pay to undergarments. If there is part of your day when you are considering the situation with your underwear, you are having a bad time. And with Skims, you're not going to have a bad time. You're going to have a lot of comfort to let you do what you do. With their lightweight material that feels amazing so you feel like you're wearing nothing at all. Whatever you're into, working out or just living your daily life, Skims has comfortable underwear. And right now you can shop SKIMS Mens at skims.com/lockedonnba and at the Skims store. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And they want you to get in on the NFL action during the postseason from first whistle to final drive. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, that's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs because your team's already at home, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. All right, still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. I don't believe in losing culture carrying over from season to season. I do think there is an in-season stink that can permeate teams. I do think there are losing players. I do think there are bad organizations that are poorly run that make mistakes over and over again. But I do not believe that a losing culture exists and gets into players' DNA, and then they become losers by virtue of a bad environment to begin their NBA careers. The embryonic state, I believe, is what I called it earlier in the show. I got 4 examples for you proving my take here. You know Devin Booker? All-Star Devin Booker. Might not make the All-Star team this year. Suns kind of suck. But Devin Booker's good. And you know what Devin Booker was at the beginning of his career? A loser. Devin Booker's rookie season, they won 23 games in Phoenix. He won 24 in year 2. The Suns won 21 in his 3rd season. They won 19 in his 4th season. It was getting worse. Devin Booker, through 4 years of his NBA career, that's your entire rookie contract, had never won a 25th game. Dude was a loser and played on losing teams on a crap franchise. They sucked. He had 3 coaches in the first 4 years. They're a mess. Head of the 2019-2020 season, they hired Monty Williams, a respected veteran coach. And the Suns were a little bit better. They went famously 8-0 in the bubble. Devin Booker hit that one jump shot and fell down and laid on his back for a little bit. They were 34-39. He'd finally tasted the magic of winning a 25th, a 30th, and then eventually a 34th game. Devin Booker was cured. The following year, the Suns signed Chris Paul. They made the freaking NBA Finals. They won 51 games. The year after that, they won 63. You know what Devin Booker was after he was a loser? He was a winner. He won a bunch of games. They were really good. He was first-team All-NBA. He didn't get poisoned by the stink. He finally got a situation and a franchise committed to putting a stable, functional environment around him. A stable, functional working environment made Devin Booker, talented basketball player, from loser, stinky loser, into first-team All-NBA, NBA Finals participant. They got the right coach. They added a Hall of Fame teammate around him. Chris Paul's freaking great. He makes every team better. Look at the stats. And all of a sudden, the stink of losing had washed off. Remember those Houston Rockets teams under Steven Silas? They were a mess. And Kevin Porter Jr., not a good dude, was throwing soup at people. Actually, the soup thing might have been in Cleveland. I apologize. But the Rockets were a mess. During the 2020-21 season, they won 17 games. That year was a 72-game season, but still, 17. Say they play 10 more games, they win half of them, they're still a 22-win team. And they're not winning half if they've already won 17 out of the first 72. The following year, they won 20 games. The year after that, they won 22. They fired Steven Silas. They hired Ime Udoka. They brought in some stabilizing vets. Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, who, for all of his warts, is a stabilizing vet because of the energy and the commitment to playing the right way he brings every day. They went 41-41 last year. They're 27-13. They're one of the best teams in the NBA. The stink of the Rockets when they had Steven Silas and they had that young core that was directionless washed off by getting a stable, functional work environment around their young players. Now, Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green, who've made all their money, are hooping, right? Like, they're hooping. Jabari Smith Jr. is having finally a really good year this year before he got hurt. Like, stable, functional work environment around youngsters who lost all the time to begin their season. All of a sudden, they're not losers anymore. In Oklahoma City, kind of a weird transition year when Shea first got there, and we had the bubble, and they still had Chris Paul. He makes every team better. And Danilo Gallinari and Dennis Schroeder, and they were like functional and had some vets. And then they said, okay, we got to lose a bunch. And so they did. They started to lose. In the 2020-2021 season, they won 22 games. Again, a reminder, 72-game season. The following year, they won 24. And in the December of 2021, they lost by 73 points. The worst loss in NBA history. And I don't know if you remember the uproar when the embarrassing Oklahoma City Thunder lost by 73, the worst loss in history, but they weren't saying nice things about Sam Presti and the way you build a roster then. They were saying that it was an abomination and an insult to the game and all of these things and why tanking doesn't work and blah, 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 blah. The following year, they won 40 games. They went 40-42. How'd they do it? They let Shea continue to develop. They already hired the right coach in Mark Daigneault, and they freaking nailed the 2022 draft and they got J-Dub, they got Jalen Williams, they got Chet, who didn't play that year, but get one of the best rookies in the league. You continue to let the ascension happen, and you playing with purpose as you continue to grow. They go 40-42. Last year, they were the number one seed. This year, they're the number one seed. The stink of back-to-back losing seasons didn't hold because they created a functional, stable working environment and allowed their players to flourish. They were not poisoned by a 73-point loss. Which brings us to the current-day Pistons, a franchise that is a mess and has been in the desert. Wait, Mike, what? Hold. This just in? You're telling me they're out of the desert because they created a functional, stable working environment for their young players to thrive? In 2020, that season, the Pistons won 20 games. The following year, 20. The year after that, 23. The year after that, 17. Oh my goodness, this has been a long time in the cellar. Last season, the Detroit Pistons won 14 games and set an NBA record with a 28-game losing streak. They were a mess. An absolute mess. So what'd they do? They fired Monty Williams because he was not the right coach. They added a bunch of shooting around Cade Cunningham, an ascendant young player. Freaking Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway Jr. with some shooting, maybe Tobias Harris, throw him in there too. Some shooting around their young star. A functional, stable, working environment. The Pistons are 21-20. They're a play-in team in the East. They've got a puncher's chance of hosting a play-in game, if not better. I do believe there are losing players. I do believe there are losing franchises. I do believe there are losing teams. I do believe that culture can be poisoned in any given moment and situation. I've worked for bad companies. I know what it's like. I've had bad bosses. I've had bad coworkers. I've hated going to work. And that wasn't a very demanding physical job that requires you to improvise at full speed with 4 other gentlemen against the best athletes in the world. I worked on computers and stuff. I had media jobs. I do think there is an opportunity cost associated with where the Blazers are right now. I think their season is kind of a sunken one to some extent. And I do think they have created a current environment and a current situation where losing is expected and accepted. Absolutely. What I do not think is that you can poison the well. What you need to do is create a functional, stable, working environment for your young core. What do these players need to thrive? Who is the coach to lead the next step? It's clearly not Chauncey Billups. We don't need to relitigate that. I do think the Blazers have a ways to go to get out of this. But I think there are too many recent examples of teams just saying, get the right coach, add the right mix of, either veteran stabilizers like in Houston or functional, like actual skill sets we need to complement, our best players like in Detroit recently, or just letting that thing marinate once you hire the right coach like in OKC, or adding the right coach and then chasing talent, or in Phoenix's case, in many ways, attracting talent because you had the right coach and the right budding star. Do the Blazers have the talent to pull out and be of this skid and be good all of a sudden? Yeah, I don't know if that's on the roster right now. But what I do know is that I am not worried about losing culture poisoning the well. I don't think Shaedon Sharpe will naturally become a loser by virtue of his first 2 years in the league, or first 3 years in the league. He didn't really play last season. I don't think Scoot is going to be poisoned. I think a functional, stable, working environment can cure a lot of that stuff. That doesn't mean that those players are good and they can be magically unlocked. Sometimes players are bad and you have to move on from them. But I do not believe in a lasting impact of a losing culture. Maybe you do. But I hope I helped you see at least where I'm coming from. Locked On Blazers doesn't have a losing culture. We have a culture of showing up to work every day. Except for a couple weeks ago when I missed the episode, but I get after it. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Blazers play 2 games over the weekend. Houston and Chicago. Your boy will be in the building. I'll tell you what I saw. Come join me. Next time you hear my voice, I'm going to record after the Bulls game, so late Sunday night in your feeds, audio feeds, very late Sunday, and video as they do on YouTube, premieres at 8 a.m. each and every weekday. Tell your friends about the program. Tell them they can get it wherever they got a podcast and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.